Hello again, investing putts. I'm going to do another real estate video. I'm probably going to do a few more. I just like making them. It's something I love to do. But don't fear. Don't unsubscribe because you think I'm never going to talk about stocks again. It's not true. I'll get back to conventional investing eventually. Anyway, so I finished grad school in 2004 and took a job in Houston with an oil company. My wife was starting business school at Rice University. That's where I did my undergrad. So it was kind of natural to buy a house near Rice, which is already close to downtown, close to where she was going to school, and I knew the area very well. Neighborhood is just south of Rice. It just seemed ideal. So it's also close to the huge Texas Medical Center. You got things like the Houston Museum District, and the local elementary school is solid, though not for middle and high school. So anyway, seemed like a solid, safe choice of neighborhood. So in 2004, as you may remember, the U.S. was gripped with housing mania, and the rise in oil that started in 2003 had lit a fire under Houston in particular. So supply was already tight, particularly in our desired price range of 200, 300,000 in this area. So remember that this was over 15 years ago, so these prices are not up to date. We didn't have kids then, so we were looking for a starter house. Though the tiny bungalows that were like, one or two bedrooms and 900 square feet just didn't appeal to us. We wanted something with, at least 2 to 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. Okay, so the property that we purchased was actually an estate sale. And I love estate sales. All 3 houses that I bought have been estate sales. It was originally listed at $375,000, but the sellers only got one offer from a builder at $340,000, and they didn't accept it. So by the time we came along, the house had been on the market for 90 days, which was an eternity in that market. And we kept looking at other houses around, and I looked at this one once. My wife hated it, but we ended up coming back to it because there was nothing else. And personally, I saw the potential originally, and she came around to it. Anyway, we ended up getting the house for $5,000 cheaper than their previous teardown offer, which was a huge win for us. The sellers had some sentimentality. It was their parents' house, and they wanted it to go to a young couple who wasn't just going to scrape it and tear it down. So we felt that the house, once fixed up, would appeal to people like us, maybe a young doctor or a young professor at Rice. But you got to remember your market. You got to know your market. You're competing against nearby mega mansions that aren't that much more expensive. So it doesn't make sense to dump $300,000 into a 2,000 square foot ranch house to make it awesome when you could buy a 4,000 square foot reasonably new house for $700,000, $800,000. So remember, this was 2004. All right, so if you're wondering why the house had no buyers, just behold, this is the foyer. It's your first view of the house. It looks like a dungeon. Ancient gold foil wallpaper and black vinyl floor tile, if you can believe such a thing. Personally, I love seeing wallpaper. People hate it and it turns them off and they just can't see past it. But I'm happy to spend a couple afternoons, stripping it, texturing over the sheetrock, and painting the wall. So wallpaper screams value to me. So when I stripped the wallpaper, I found some old termite damage in the sheetrock, so I replaced it. But you notice that on the floor, I uncovered nice oak tongue and groove hardwood floors when I removed those vinyl tiles. So that was like digging up several $1,000s right there. So after painting, refinishing the floor, installing new lights and a door, the foyer actually looks pretty inviting and I dare say kind of cute. So I'm just going to take you on a virtual tour of the house just so you can get a sense of the stuff that we did and stuff we didn't do. It was all superficial. So the before photo here is from a large living room, which had a weird sliding wall partition. So I framed in a wall to split that room in half and make a third bedroom, which you can see below. I also painted the mahogany paneling. The mid-century modern purists at the time were just up in arms about what I did to the paneling, but I tried to use paint stripper to remove that old varnish, but that's an awful job. And I quickly concluded that life is too short. I had to just paint that stuff. I think it looks good enough. So here's an office with awful carpeting and drapes that I transformed into my infant daughter's room. And just so you know, she's a freshman in high school right now. Here's the dining room. New light fixture, paint the wall, uncover the carpet, stage it with some art and Pottery Barn furniture, and hey, it's kind of cute. So the kitchen was horrid, and that's where you can dump a lot of money into a kitchen, as you probably well know. I opted for a really cheap redo. I painted the cabinets with a sprayer, oil-based paint. It was awful, but it worked pretty well. Installed a new sink, new appliances, except for the stove, which was in okay shape. I also tiled the floor and tiled right over the top of the Formica countertops. You could still get away with tile countertops in 2004, but just barely, and not for long. Granite went mainstream pretty soon after that. So here's the living room, old lady to Pottery Barn. Master bedroom. I was too cheap even to replace the light fixture. So the house had single pane casement windows, which in a hot place like Houston are just horrible. I did not replace those. But if you're looking to take the house kind of up a notch in the market, it's a fairly obvious upgrade and really one of the more good value for the money ones, in my opinion. We probably could have done that. The windows in that house for probably $15,000 in the day's money. Here's a view of that long living room that I cut in half of the wall. This is the other side of the wall, which I turned into an office. I really liked that office, and it was probably my favorite room in that house. Had a nice view into the backyard. It was a lot of natural light. It was great. Unfortunately, the sellers, the estate sale people, took all the cool mid-century modern furniture that you see in the top photo. I really wanted that stuff, but they took it. Okay, so what didn't we do? The two bathrooms were mid-century doozies. You've all seen the colored tile. We elected not to do much of anything to the bathroom, and that was a strategic decision. If you upgrade the bathrooms, then in my opinion, you're also obliged to upgrade the windows and the kitchen to take it to that next price point. You need to stay in one price point or the other. If you upgrade the bathrooms but have a crappy kitchen and crappy windows, then the higher end sellers are going to ding you, and you might sit on the market longer than you would. So I think it's key not to leave glaring issues in a house that are inconsistent with the market that you're trying to attack. Here's the other bathroom. I did hardly anything to this. Just painted it and changed the light fixtures. Horrible. All right, here's a quick budget of our improvements. You can hit stop if you want to look at the details, but believe it or not, we only spent 10 grand fixing this place, and all the work pretty much was DIY. Light fixtures, appliances, tile, a little bit of framing, refinished the floors. We had someone else do that. Painting and a new water heater, which I had to do. We didn't have to replace we didn't replace any of the other big ticket items like the roof or the AC, and I strategically didn't replace the windows, bathrooms, or kitchen. So now on to the exit. We sold the house after 2.5 years for $515,000. That's a tidy 54% return, or about 21% annualized. Case-Shiller index for the greater Houston area only rose by 15% over that same period, from 156 to 179. So if you interpret the results naively, you can say that 50,000 out of the 180,000 in total profit came from a broad-based market rise in housing, and the other 130,000 came from our improvements. Since we only spent $10,000 on improvements, that's a whopping 13-to-1 return on that $10,000. However, I put an asterisk next to that bullet because that's a naive interpretation. Houston suburbs are notorious for having weak housing markets. There's no geographic barrier to new construction, and construction costs are cheap, land's cheap. So if you just go a few miles further from downtown and tolerate the crappy commute, you can always buy a brand new house. And so what that does is kind of drives the price of existing homes down out in the burbs. However, we were very centrally located. We were close to some of the nice things like Rice University, some of the shopping, museum district, downtown. So these areas have higher land costs, general higher level of desirability, and I think the localized market in this area was much stronger than Houston as a whole. So if I had to guess, I would guess that $50,000 of our profit was attributable to our $10,000 in improvements. rather than the other way around. So it's still an amazing 5x return, but a little more realistic. Okay, so this house project began as an ugly starter house and ended up as a move-in ready starter house. Small family, young people kind of house. So from my recollection, what I would call an entry-level luxury home in this area would sell for about $600,000. So to take this house into that entry-level luxury class, I believe that we'd have to replace the windows, do the bathrooms, do the kitchen, and do some of the major systems like the roof, the AC, and the garage door. People, when they think they're buying luxury, they don't tolerate warts. Okay, so these prices here, I assume that the work is contracted out. You could save a lot of money if you DIY'd it, but in Houston at that time, the trades were pretty cheap, so you could get good deals. So anyway, the total I get for those things I just mentioned was $63,000 in improvements. So then if I sell that house for $63,000, then it means I spent an additional $63,000 to get an additional $85,000 in sales price. So in other words, that's a $600,000 minus the $515,000 that I sold it for as a starter house. And you have to keep, so you could probably get a positive return on the incremental extra spending to take it to the higher level, but it's risky. You're spending $90,000 instead of $10,000. And you have to remember your competition in the area. You could buy a reasonably new large house for about $750,000, and you could build a new one for about $1 million. So it certainly wouldn't make sense to spend $200,000 renovating this house, and someone can go buy something much bigger that's still reasonably new. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. This is what I would consider kind of a case study in finding value in sort of that lower to mid market at the time. So I'll do another case study on kind of a mid-level market house flip, where I had a little higher standards on what I had to do to the house to get it to sell what I sold it for. So anyway, look forward to your comments, and like I said, I'm not going to keep doing these forever, but I'll do a few more probably, unless there's a groundswell of interest and you guys really want it. But see you later.